It's real to even make this video because we've been listening about Batman v Superman for very close to 3 years now. Ever since Man of Steel came out, just a month later we got, the teaser that it was going to be a Batman and Superman movie concurrently. Then we had, the casting of Ben Affleck as late as August 2013, and then we've just had this steady trickle of news and information and misinformation in the form of various rumors and just blatant lies going around about the film. It was supposed to come out in July of 2015, then it didn't come out because it was delayed to fight with Civil War, and then it got moved forward to get away from Civil War, and it's just been this experience just following the development of this film for as long as we have. And so it felt weird to even exist in a world where this movie finally came out. And the reception to it has been pretty damn interesting, to say the least. It's been pretty divisive. A lot of the more professional reviewers really dislike the film. But from what I'm seeing from comic book fans, there's some people who really hate it. I've seen some guys who really love it. And then, unlike Man of Steel, there seems to be more of a middle ground between the two, where some people are saying it's not fantastic, but it's not outright bad at all. The critics are saying it's just kind of average. And this is a real weird movie for me to even review, because this is not the real version of the movie, because there is going to be a director's cut coming out, in a few months, that is going to have, the complete runtime of the film. And so there are quite a few problems here that I don't really know if they stem from the fact that stuff was just cut out or that stuff was just underdeveloped. But considering the fact that that quite a bit of care went into the script of this thing, I'm going to assume that some things that are just kind of only inferred to and not properly truly built upon, like, say, in Age of Ultron, which this movie has a lot of problems, such as Age of Ultron. The aforementioned, a lot of ideas are presented, they're kind of there, they're kind of inferred to, but they're not. But it's very obvious that the material that is supposed to tie all these ideas together to make a big cohesive whole out of them is very obviously missing. And so, considering the fact the kind of state the script is in this movie, and I think the script is pretty damn good, it's going to be weird to critique this movie. And I understand completely why a lot of people are going to flat out dislike this film, because this is unlike a Batman and Superman movie that I ever thought I was going to get. Because when you think of Batman and Superman movie, you of course have them getting into a misunderstanding and then fighting and then coming to mutually respect one another, and then at the end it's going to be them teaming up to fight a villain, and the film is going to end as like a big celebration of both characters. And the whole film in itself is going to be a big celebration of why these guys are amazing and why these guys fighting together is going to be cool. That's not this movie. This movie takes a pretty different path than I thought it was going to take, because I thought that it was going to conform to that whole idea of these guys are going to fight in the middle of the film, and then they're going to team up, they're going to get mutual understanding for one another, and then it's going to be like this big fuck yeah, there's Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, here's the dawn of the Justice League coming. It's going to be like this. It's going to be kind of like an Avengers, a big celebration of what these characters are and what they mean. But this movie really isn't like that. The Batman that is presented in this film, he comes from a place that is very understandable, but the way he's going about it truly does show you that this is a Batman who has been truly pushed to his limits, that this is a Batman who has been kind of consumed by the job, and this is a Batman who is very different from the other versions of the character, because even the other versions who were darker, they still kind of had this sense of heroism about them. This Batman has just kind of been worn down after 20 years of his whole crusade not really doing anything for Gotham, and he feels like that stopping Superman is the only thing that will ever matter in his life. And the film truly does do an excellent job of showing you how far this guy has been pushed, how far he's willing to go, and just how messed up of a human being he is, really. Same thing with Superman. The Superman portrayed in this film is very much like the Earth 1 version, where he feels very detached from humanity, and this comes from the expectations that people have for him, because Superman is trying to kind of hold himself up to the classic Superman standards, where he expects, that just by doing the right thing, that the world is automatically going to become a much better place, that everything is going to, eventually work out as the good deeds, start mounting up. But the fact of the matter is that the world is not so black and white. That this film really does portray this as a situation where Superman is basically in a no-win scenario no matter what he does. Like if he saves a cat out of a tree, some high school is going to get blown up, and then people are going to blame Superman for saving a cat in a tree instead of stopping this high school being blown up. Basically Columbine from happening. And these kinds of expectations do wear down on Superman, and this kind of does bring his relationships with Martha and Lois to the forefront, because these guys are his strongest tethers to humanity, and this is kind of most apparent in the scenes where these characters are together, because every time Superman is kind of on the job, every time he's talking to kind of people who aren't Lois and Martha, he kind of feels, he very much looks like a man uncomfortable in his own skin, because he just can't figure out what the hell he's supposed to do, and no matter what he does, it never feels like it's good enough. It never feels like he's just doing enough, even though he's kind of doing his best. And no matter what he does, he's always kind of fucking things up. And his relationships with Lois and Martha really do show they're pretty much his last tethers to humanity, and that's pretty much apparent, like I said, in the scenes where they're together, where Clark with Lois feels very relaxed, he feels very natural, he feels very safe with Martha, and these connections make up kind of the crux of his character arc throughout the film. And this is already going to be a big point of contention for a lot of people, because these guys are not portrayed in their best light in this movie. Like I said, the Superman here feels very detached from humanity. He feels very alone. He feels very conflicted about his job, and no matter what he does, he feels like he's fucking up. And then we have a Batman here who's willing to go farther than any other version of the character, and he's consciously doing so. And so already, this film is creating a situation where it's presenting both of its lead characters as not the greatest people in the world, that guys who are just as kind of screwed up as any other person, and that's already going to be a big point of contention for a lot of people. But personally, I found it really fascinating. I really like that the film makes you like and dislike Batman at the same time, because like I said, his motivation comes from a very relatable place, but the lengths he's willing to go to already make him a more morally gray version of the character. And Superman, despite the fact that Man of Steel does not work on a storytelling or character level or at all, I really do like this Earth One-esque idea that this is a Superman who is kind of detached from humanity, and as he's going to work on and more as Superman, he's going to become more of the Superman that we probably know and love, and that he's going to become more of the icon of righteousness and a true symbol for regular people to stand behind. What else was I going to say? So yeah, already this movie is kind of doing stuff that I know are going to rub a lot of people the wrong way. And another thing that's going to really rub people the wrong way that I thought was actually kind of fascinating is the fact that this movie combines so many different versions of DC Comics storylines. You got Death of Superman elements here, you got Dark Knight Returns elements here, you got Earth One elements here, and there's a bunch of other stuff that I probably don't even realize. But it's this very weird original storyline that's also an amalgamation of various different storylines from throughout the DC universe, and it manages, I think, to pretty successfully tie them all together and make them all work in a pretty original movie. And the fact that this film is pretty much the first and so far only time where Batman fighting Superman has actually any kind of story relevance to both the characters, the fact that there is an honest-to-God storyline with an actual beginning, middle, and end here that leads into bigger and better things is already a testament to how good the script actually is and how superior this version of their battle is to pretty much any other version I've ever seen. Because in every other time Batman and Superman fight, it's always a stupid, fucking, boring ass misunderstanding thing. Then they fight and then they become best friends immediately afterward. The movie does not do that here. What really happens in the end of the movie really caught me by surprise. I did not think that they were going to do what they do, but I think the idea is so interesting and allows for a lot of really damn cool possibilities for future movies to explore that I'm pretty much on board with the ending. And admittedly, the trailers do spoil some things that I wish were not spoiled, like Doomsday, of course, but there were still a couple of moments where I was like, holy fucking shit, I cannot believe that they're actually doing this. I cannot believe that they actually went there. And once again, this is going to be something that's going to rub people the wrong way, because there are going to be people who are going to say, oh, well, Superman should have been able to see that and stop that, or wow, I can't believe they're doing that. Like, no one's going to fucking get what you tried to say with this scene, because it's very much ingrained into the lore of the DC universe. And this movie is very weird. Like, this is a movie that only I could probably like a guy who knows comic books, but he's kind of so lenient on the adaptations of comic books, and he's kind of just open for comic book adaptations to explore just these crazy different directions. Like, I'm pretty much the target audience for this movie, I suppose, because this film is not going to fit into the mainstream perception of what a Batman Superman movie is going to be. It's not a big celebration of either characters, like I already said, and it's going to rub a lot of comic book fans the wrong way, because it does take a kind of controversial stance on these two characters that isn't in line with the comic books, with the classic, most well-known comic books. And that's kind of a problem DC characters just have. They're so iconic that people just have these preconceived notions of what Superman absolutely always, no matter what version we're talking about, must be, and the second you stray from that, you fucking ruin the entire character. I'm personally not one of those people. In fact, I find that whole mentality of you fucking ruin Superman because he doesn't have the fucking S-curl, I just find that whole mentality really, really stupid. Jesse Eisenberg is Lex Luthor. I really, really like this guy, and the fact of the matter is, this Lex Luthor pretty much has a lot of the essential elements of Lex Luthor, but his personality just conveys those traits differently. In the comic books, Lex Luthor is very much a guy who knows he's smarter than everybody else. He's very conniving. He's a cunning, scum-sucking little shit who acts more stoic and more professional, and he just kind of lets his actions talk for themselves. This version of Lex Luthor is pretty much the same way. He knows that he's smarter than everybody else. He has this sort of complex to Superman. He has kind of a more personal stake in wanting Superman gone. And it's very much the same character, but the way Jesse Eisenberg plays him is the fact that this guy knows that he's so smart that he doesn't really have to act like anybody else. Like, this guy knows that he's so far above us in terms of intellect, in terms of power, in terms of influence, that he doesn't have to fucking act like we do. Like, he can just talk to a senator like any other person. He doesn't really have to show anybody respect. He doesn't really have to conform to, casual kind of elements of normal conversations that we other normal people would have. And he doesn't, really hide the fact that he is kind of a vicious scumbag. And I think that Jesse Eisenberg is a pretty good actor to get that role, because Jesse Eisenberg has the kind of tone and voice and kind of face where Zack Snyder himself, explained that when you're talking to this guy, you really don't know if he's kind of mocking you because of the way he just kind of holds himself, the kind of voice that he has. And I think for this version of Lex Luthor, I think that really, really works. And I was a pretty big fan of their interpretation of the character. Now, that being said, there are some problems with the film. The score, minus the Lex theme and the Wonder Woman theme, is pretty forgettable. It's pretty generic. I really, really didn't like it. The Wonder Woman inclusion is completely pointless because, I like Gal Gadot as a Wonder Woman. I think she did a fine job with what she got. She looks fine in the action scenes, yada, yada, yada. I think that she's probably one of the most undeservingly praised things about the film, because her role very easily could have been fulfilled by Batman, and she's very obviously just there for the sake of the whole Dawn of Justice part of the storyline. I do like what she kind of does for Batman's character, but as her own character, she really doesn't have enough screen time to really have anything close to an arc, and I don't know if that was just left on the cutting room floor, or if her role was just written this way. But considering the fact that the script really goes out of its way to make as much sense as it possibly can with all these various cogs moving at the same time, I'm going to assume that it probably is more of a thing of the editing room fucking things up. But the fact of the matter is that even though I've made kind of like excuses for the director's cut, here's also a big problem with the film. There are multiple parts in the film where I feel like instead of doing this whole part in 2 or 3 scenes, you could have done it in one slightly longer scene. And because Zack Snyder chose to kind of divide certain scenes up like this, the film can feel very kind of disjointed. It can feel like we're getting invested into the Bruce Wayne scene, and then it jumps suddenly to Superman, and then jumps back to Batman. And I feel like with just a bit more clever editing, you very easily could have cut down some of these superfluous scenes, and you probably could have added in more of the material that is in the director's cut into the theatrical cut of the film to bring back the meat into the story. What else did I? It was not crazy about. Basically, it's like Age of Ultron. Like I really can't name any major faults besides that one. I don't think that Zack Snyder goes completely full retard like I thought he would, because one of the things I was really expecting this movie from the reviews is that Zack Snyder just goes full retard, like that Chris Terrio gave him a fantastic script and then Zack Snyder just went full retard with it, which is something that happened in Man of Steel. Man of Steel was a film where there was a bunch of stuff that was in the movie that wasn't in the script. Superman fighting the tentacle thing over the Indian Ocean, Superman fighting Zod. A lot of those elements that were in the actual film were not in the script. They were added in by Zack Snyder because he thought they would be cool. And there are probably lots and lots of other instances where he just does stuff because it's cool and not because it serves the storyline in any significant way. And there are a couple of scenes where I was like, what the fuck are you doing, Zack? Like, what the fuck are you trying to tell me, bro? Like, what are you doing by showing me this? And there are a couple of scenes like that, but I have to say that Zack Snyder pretty much restrains himself pretty well in this movie, because this is another thing that's going to piss people off. This movie is 80% just setting stuff up. And setting stuff up for sequels. This movie has the same structure as Ant-Man, where the first third is setting up who the characters are, what their situation is, and what's going on with them. And then the second act is all building up to the big battle between Batman and Superman, and then the Trinity versus Doomsday. It is all the characters kind of getting to a point in this storyline where they will clash against one another, and where their various plans and schemes have all intertwined enough and that they start colliding into one another. And it's very much like Ant-Man, and I really, really like the structure of Ant-Man, because a problem a lot of comic book movies have these days, especially Marvel ones, is that they sprinkle in plot and action to the point where you just kind of get sick of the movie by the end. And this is a problem that I have with even some of my favorite Marvel movies and some of the best comic book movies of all time, like Guardians of the Galaxy and Winter Soldier. Those are movies that I fucking love to death. But the problem with them is that I feel like there's so much action interspersed between the storyline that by the time the big climactic action set piece happens, I'm just kind of fucking sick of the movie and I want it to end. Because, I've seen Captain America fight like 7 or 8 times by now, and now when we're at this big climax that's going to take like 15 fucking minutes to end, I'm just like, can we please kind of finish already? I mean, this is cool shit, but you've already kind of just outstayed your welcome, and you're not really, you're just outstaying your welcome, bro. Just fucking end already. But this movie, because this movie has like maybe 5 or 6 action scenes, set pieces in the entire thing, most of which are in the final act, this movie feels very kind of refreshing, because like I said, by the time the climax of the big Marvel movies happens, I'm already kind of just halfway sick of it and just barely holding on my interest. But here, by the time the final fights happen, I'm not burned out. I'm not bored. I'm not, just waiting for the movie to kind of end already, even if I'm mostly enjoying myself. By the time the final battles here happen, the battles feel more impactful because I have the energy to give more of a fuck about the fights themselves. It's kind of what the Desolation of Smog failed to do, where it just dragged out a fight so much that I just could not give a shit anymore. Or, in the case of Man of Steel, where there's just so much action that by the time the big climax happens, I just don't have the energy to care anymore. And that's kind of like another big thing, that the fight scenes are really understated. Like when I heard that Zack Snyder was going to do Batman versus Superman, I thought he was going to do this big overblown thing where it's just going to be like the craziest fucking shit ever, and it's not. The fight is actually left in one single location, and it's more about the characters themselves fighting. It's not really about the spectacle of the fight itself. And I thought that was really, really ballsy, and I know that's going to rub people the wrong way, because you have, the trailer saying that this is going to be like the gladiator match of the century. but it's really, really not. It's really not a big spectacle piece like you expect it to. In fact, I would say that the animated version of the Dark Knight Returns fight is way, way more over the top than this. Like, there is no Batman grabbing a bulldozer ball and throwing it at Superman. There is no Batman grabbing two steamrollers together and then smashing Superman with them. Like, there is nothing so over the top. Hell, even the bit where Batman uses, all the electricity in all of Gotham to shock Superman, that's not even in the movie, and that's in the comic book, but it's not in the movie. And I was really, really surprised by that. Like, I thought that at least that was going to make it into the film, but it's not. And I know that's going to rub people the wrong way because it's not a big spectacle piece. It's kind of more brutal. It's kind of more down to earth. And that's probably going to piss people off. And that kind of took me by surprise. But I think that when I think about how we got here and how the characters got here, I think it works on that emotional level. So yeah, this is a really weird movie. But it's a weird movie that I would categorize as the same thing as Age of Ultron, where Age of Ultron most definitely has more broad audience appeal and more comic book fan appeal. These movies are ultimately on the same level for me. These are both movies that have lots and lots of really interesting ideas and a lot of interesting things to say about their characters. More so with Batman v Superman than Age of Ultron, of course. That movie kind of just plays more around with a more interesting villain. This time around, Batman v Superman takes a more interesting look at its main characters themselves. But ultimately, I would rank them both as like a solid 7 or 7.5 films. There's very obviously more material here to look at. There is very obviously more things to see about this particular film that I'm really looking forward to the director's cut. I'm really interested to see what was left at the cutting room floor. I'm really interested to see just how much of the connective tissue was lost because of that half hour that got cut out of the theatrical release. Because I really want to see that. I really want to see how this movie works as a complete whole. And that's kind of why I was even apprehensive about making this a real review video, because I'm not watching the full movie, not yet. So it just feels weird to review it now. And honestly, I wish that Age of Ultron could have gotten an extended edition too, because I think that there's a movie in there that I should love, but something is missing. Something is missing that's holding me back from truly just saying, fuck yeah, this movie is awesome. And that's the same problem I have with Batman v Superman. That's probably the biggest problem I have with the film, where I feel like there is just some other tantalizing piece of content missing that if you just gave it to me right now, I would probably like the film considerably more and maybe even love it. And ultimately, these two films are on the same level for me. Obviously, in my opinion, Age of Ultron has improved, considerably, so that's not really a knock against this film. But there are problems here. There's very obviously lots and lots of editing issues. The soundtrack is just, like I said, kind of shit. And Wonder Woman is almost completely superfluous to even be in this film. I don't think this is a big sequel baiting fest. In fact, I think that this film has a much better ending and more natural ending than Age of Ultron, where Age of Ultron's ending just kind of undermines itself and it undermines its bigger universe because it's trying to make this big happy ending when an entire city got blown up and we have Civil War coming right afterward. Whereas this ending does not really do that. The tone doesn't immediately shift into something completely else like Age of Ultron or even Man of Steel did. The ending feels earned, the ending feels logical, and the cameos that are in the film are not cameos like like Black Widow and Iron Man 2, where she's just there for setup in the Avengers. That's not how the cameos in this film work. The cameos are more like the computer screen from X2, where there's a bunch of information and data and footage of these other metahumans, but they don't just randomly pop into the story just for the sake of setup. It feels like a natural way of building to the universe, and I really like the fact that the ending did not undermine itself like Man of Steel and Age of Ultron kind of do by the end. So yeah, I give this movie like a 7 to 7.5. It's a movie that I feel like I should really, really love, but like I said, the content that is supposed to make it a truly great movie is still missing, and I'm really excited to see the director's cut. I've probably, solidified myself as this weird motherfucker who just always goes against the public opinion, but honestly, I think that this is one of the most interesting comic book movies I've ever seen, just in the way it goes about doing its own storyline. And I know it's going to rub people the wrong way, and there are some legitimate grievances that people are going to have with that. But personally, as a guy who's pretty much okay with anything you do with these guys, I found myself pleasantly surprised by the film, especially after just spending a couple of days of just watching everybody just collectively destroy it, at least on Rotten Tomatoes. So yeah, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, it's a solid comic book film. It's probably not the big epic spectacle, 10 out of 10 or 15 out of 10 epic greatest film ever material that you were probably hoping for and expecting, considering the fact that this is the first time Batman and Superman are meeting on the first screen. But I think it's an interesting film in its own right, and a lot of the things that it does, I think it does very, very well. And it's a solid film that I really want to see the complete version of, to truly give a complete review of, to really solidify just what my feelings on it are. So yeah, guys, this has been a really, really long video, a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, but if you guys have any comment, if you guys want to comment or rate and subscribe to my channel, you can do so in the usual places, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye.